From Illinois Policy, Adam Schuster, who's Director of Budget and Tax Research, is taking time out of his day for us. Adam, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for taking time out of your day. I really enjoyed your column in the State Journal Register. Guest view Illinois' 4 pillars of bad budgeting. And, boy, you nailed it right on the head. And I guess most people look at it and go, what, there's only 4? We're only making 4 mistakes?
I had to pick 4, but no. Well, these are really the 4 worst practices that we have. I mean, there's absolutely more things that are broken, but really what I'm pushing and what Illinois Policy is pushing in that article and some of the research on our website is that Illinois needs to do budgeting the same way that every resident of the state does around their kitchen table, the same way a small business owner does, and it's really just sort of common sense things like knowing how much money you have before you make a plan for how to spend it. Using accounting practices that show the true size of your spending today, not tomorrow. So those are just a few of the things that we're talking about. And like you said, we always try to have a solution when we point out the problems. And the big solution we're pushing right now down in the General Assembly is a constitutional spending cap amendment.
Because we are spending a whole lot more than we're taking in, and you bring up some examples of how much spending grew as opposed to how much money those of us who live in the state were bringing home.
Yeah, that's right. So from 2005 to 2015, the state spending grew 25% faster than personal income. So when you have a situation like that, the only thing that they can do is either cut spending to a reasonable level, what taxpayers can afford, or when spending is going to outpace our incomes by that much, they need to hike taxes or borrow money. And borrowing money is really just the same thing as a future tax hike because eventually they have to pay the bill.
Yeah, and somebody gets hit with that bill at some point. So, you often hear the expression in politics, kicking the can down the road. This is what that is.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they love to kick the can down the road. So one of the things I pointed out is the way we use the accounting practice we use for budgeting is basically it only counts spending when you actually pay the bill, not when you incur it. So the example we use in your personal life is this is like saying you balanced your budget this month by just not paying your electric bill, right? You push it off onto a future month. Or in the case of Illinois, sometimes onto a future generation or a future politician because they hope they'll be out of office by the time somebody has to pay the bill.
Which is just stunning. And when you look at it, when initially you said, get them to do what we all do as we sit around the kitchen table and go over our bills and what we can spend and all that. It's not like these people down in Springfield don't have regular homes to go to where they employ those exact same techniques. They just can't seem to apply them at work.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a great quote from Milton Friedman, who's a hero of mine. He said, "Nobody spends someone else's money as carefully as they spend their own." And we certainly see that with Illinois politicians. They're down there making decisions about how much to spend, and they haven't even agreed on a revenue estimate yet. A revenue estimate is a projection for how much money you're going to have coming in over the next year, and they can't even get that step. So the solution we're pushing, the spending cap, gives them a set amount of money that they have to spend. The spending can only grow each year by as much as the economy's grown, and so that gives them a magic number to plan their budget around. And again, this is a common sense solution for us, and we've actually gotten some bipartisan support for it down in Springfield.
I would think so. I know battle lines are drawn along the political spectrum, but at the same time, what you're suggesting here is not complex, and as we said, it's not anything that people don't perform in their own daily lives.
Yeah, that's right. And beyond that, about half of U.S. states have some kind of spending cap. And some of those are better than others and more effective than others. But this is something that we see from states, mostly Democrat-controlled California to conservative Texas to swing states like Florida and Ohio. Many states do this because it's a better way to do budgeting. And so, unfortunately, the constitutional amendment, first it would need to get 3/5 vote in each house, and then it would need to go to the voters for approval. So basically, it can't affect this year's budget. So what we're doing is we're calling on lawmakers to voluntarily adopt the spending cap and to pass a full year's balanced budget that lives within its means this year. and not wait for a change in the Constitution. And I would encourage all of your listeners to put pressure on their lawmaker and ask them to do the same thing and be fiscally responsible.
Yeah, because if you don't let them know this is the way you feel, then they can, well, I didn't hear anything from my constituents on this, or they were pretty quiet, so let them know how you feel, because, you break it down. They are still the hired help. Will Rogers had it right, and you shouldn't be ashamed at the idea of calling them up and saying, I really don't like what you're doing here.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they work for us. You're absolutely right. And, a lot of times we'll get questions like, is there an appetite for this in the General Assembly or among legislators? And I understand why people ask that question, but the more important question is there an appetite for this among taxpayers? Because they're there to serve taxpayers. And unfortunately, too often taxpayers don't have a voice down in Springfield. And that's what Illinois policy is here to be. We're here to be a voice for the voiceless and a voice for your average taxpayer, not special interests.
And you guys do a fine job of it as well. We're spending time with Adam Schuster, Director of Budget and Tax Research at Illinois Policy. Now, this, many people, I think, may have heard this in passing or aren't aware. Don't we have a constitutional, aren't we supposed to have a balanced budget yet? Since 2001, we haven't?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to add teeth to the balanced budget requirement in the Constitution. So the Constitution on paper requires a balanced budget, but there's all kinds of gimmicks that they use to get around that. Some of them aren't even really gimmicks. They just kind of disobey it. Like, for example, you have to know how much money you have before you can decide how to spend it. Obvious, right? People don't even need to be told that. Well, in Illinois, we haven't even officially adopted a revenue estimate since 2013. So that means lawmakers are flying blind the last few years. They're deciding how to spend your money without agreeing on how much of it there is in the first place. So how can you balance a budget in that type of environment? And so, again, just coming back to the spending cap, this gets us out of, it changes the conversation around budgeting. No longer is it about how much money do we have, or worse, how much more can we take from taxpayers. The entire conversation is, okay, we know how much money we have, now how do we prioritize it?
Which, once again, I love how it makes common sense, and it's not something, it is something that everyone who works for a living and has cash inflow and outflow and all that has to go through on a daily life. The idea that you need to instruct, the people we've hired down in Springfield to do the same thing is mind-boggling, but it also explains the straits we find ourselves in this state.
Yeah, that's right. And especially since it's an election year, we need to be extra vigilant and make sure lawmakers know that we're not going to put up with any more half measures or gimmicks. Because, there's another article on IllinoisPolicy.org where I'm sort of trying to predict the unpredictable. Will we have a budget this year? That shouldn't even be a question we have to ask, but in Illinois we do. And unfortunately, in election years, the Illinois politicians have shown that they prefer to kick the can. They prefer to wait to make the tough decisions. But we're really coming to a tipping point here in Illinois if we're not there already. We've got $250 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. We've got somewhere around $7 billion in a bill backlog, unpaid bills. And these things aren't going away. We've got a structural deficit. This, like you said, the budget hasn't been balanced since 2001. So we really need to start making these tough choices and set Illinois back on the path towards fiscal health.
So the big question is, and you would be the guy to know because you're the expert in this one, let's place our wagers here. If we're going to run out to Vegas and place a bet on will we or won't we, will we get the full year balanced budget or do we get another stopgap impasse?
Well, I hate to predict the unpredictable, but like I said, if history's any guide, we can expect some gamesmanship down in Springfield. They tend to use the budget as a political weapon, and going into an election year, we can expect that to happen. I mean, the Speaker of the House, Michael Madigan, has basically total control over the process. And while right now we do see both sides have appointed budgeteers, which, just a fancy word. They've appointed people to negotiate the budget. But there's some worry that those negotiations might just be a farce and that it might blow up down the road. I guess we'll wait and see, but ultimately taxpayers deserve and should demand a full year balanced budget this year with no new taxes.